This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome to The Clash, where we take real life and culture and we allow it to clash into a Christian worldview. I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm joined by
Chris Whaley.
And together we're going to share with you what we call the Take It Home episode. Now, Chris, that sounds like a fancy fast food order. But that's not what this is about. That phrase, take it home, is actually a wrestling phrase.
Yeah, when two guys are working, you're supposed to go, a certain time limit, and then when it's time to do the finish, that's what you say, take it home.
Okay. Now, is that something in the ring?
Yeah.
You actually say to the guy you're working with, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take it home.
Hopefully you whisper it in their ear. You're close enough where the first three rows don't hear you. Take it home. How's it work?
I've worked with some guys that talk too loud.
Okay.
Yeah, that was definitely like, oh my goodness, people hearing this stuff. But no, you get a guy, you're in the corner with him, and you can say take it home real, underneath your breath, and you don't want to say it loud for everybody to hear.
Okay. Well, this show, if you haven't figured it out yet, we are once again going to dive into the world of professional wrestling, and we're going to, it's not really peel back the layers a little bit, but talk a little bit about the industry and what it means to work. What it's like to work in the industry. And kind of, I'm going to ask you some pretty honest, real questions about maybe what some people think when they first think of pro wrestling and critique it a little bit. Okay, and so in this first segment here, I'm gonna offer the argument that you hear from people who just want to scoff at wrestling and not really take it seriously. Is it fake?
No.
Okay.
How do you fake a body slam, Jeff?
I have no idea.
How do you fake a steel chair to the head? How do you cannot fake that. Is it predetermined? You know who's going to win, you know who's going to lose, yeah. But it's amazing how things have changed, because when I first started training, when I first started working, you protected the business. Matter of fact, our word was kayfabe, kayfabe. And you don't want to, give up the secrets of your profession. And Vince McMahon changed all that with changing it to, instead of the World Wrestling Federation to World Wrestling Entertainment.
Right, sports entertainment became the key phrase,
but,
right? Yeah.
The big thing that happened, I don't know if it was in I think it was in the early 80s, late 70s, John Stossel for 2020, when Barbara Walters was on there. Did an episode on professional wrestling, and there was a guy who, by the name of Eddie Mansfield, who, betrayed the business and told him, basically that it was a work. And Stossel made the mistake of going up to Dr. Death, David Schultz, and saying, it's fake, isn't it? And of course, Dr. Death slapped him upside the head. It's on YouTube, you can see it. And then when he got up, he said, that was a nice, fake head slap. Here's another one. Ow! He did it again. Of course, he got sued. But, all the beans were out. So it's not fake. But, man, the most athletic people I've ever met in my life have been professional wrestlers. And, you've got to be in the best of shape physically to do it. You still get hurt. When I speak at events or go to autograph signings and stuff, and somebody comes up and says to me, about fake wrestling, I crush my ankle. I've had 5 knee surgeries, both ACLs, MCLs, lateral releases, dislocated hips, broke pelvis, broke all my ribs, my sternum, both collarbones. I've had both shoulders surgically repaired, neck injuries, back injuries, broke my nose so many times I can't breathe out of it. I'm practically deaf in this ear from getting hit in the ear with punches by right-handed wrestlers. And I've had over 100 concussions. So if it's fake, somebody forgot to tell me.
I was going to say, yeah, fake never felt so bad, did it?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, as you think back then over the career, I mean, of course, and that's one of those criticisms that people throw out. They don't understand it. So really, but you mentioned a second ago, to be a wrestler, I mean, there's a great deal of athleticism that's involved in this thing. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about what it, the idea. I mean, as you shared it with me, is you work with someone. Mm-hmm. So if you're working with someone, we're working against the ring with each other. How does that how do you communicate what's going to happen? We both get in the ring. We both start. What are the cues we're looking for? I mean, how does that dynamic take place with somebody you maybe don't know very well?
Well, today is completely different than it was in my day. And in my day, it had to do with your training. I worked with the great Malenko for 6 months before I had my first match. But whenever I got into that ring for the very first time, I felt prepared for that. I knew what I was doing, and when I locked up with holes. When somebody would do something, I knew exactly what they were doing, and I knew how I had to respond. You learn how to work in the ring. I mean, the heel pretty much leads the match, and one of the things I've heard from people saying it's all choreographed. I would show up. Usually, the baby faces is in one locker room, and the heels were in another. Yeah. You didn't get to talk to them.
Sure.
So you went out to the ring and you just worked. I mean, you did it. It's a lot different today because I think they, kind of script some things and go over it and, I'm going to do this and you do this and so forth. But that's not the way it was when I was working.
Now, and you just said something too. You said that the heel basically leads the match. Is that because the goal is that as you're playing this out, the heel is going to beat up the baby face or the good guy to the point where then all of a sudden we flip it at the end and hopefully for the fans, right, the hero goes over. Mm-hmm. Is that why the heel leads? I mean, why does it work that way?
I think so. In my day, today they're just so many high spots. Mm-hmm. And do you know what I'm talking about when I say, okay, when high spots, there's big, jumping off the top ropes and big doing moment. This and that and other. But we can talk about it after the break.
Okay. Well, we're kind of doing a behind the scenes deep dive, and we're going to keep talking about that. But we want to take a minute, take a break. Don't go anywhere. We got Chris. He's telling us everything we need to know about wrestling. So come back in just a second.
Hey, you been doing anything lately?
Oh, no. Well, yeah, actually I have. Matter of fact, if you like books, my second novel, Unlocking the Kingdom, has now been released this month as an audiobook.
So right. I don't have to read it, I can listen to it?
You can listen to it. Cool. Key to the Kingdom came out a year ago. Yeah. Now, Unlocking the Kingdom is out. Jessica Gardner, who you might have seen on Geico commercials. She's a regular on NCIS. She is the narrator, so she really performs the book. She's a rock star. She knocks it out of the park. She brings the characters to life. She does a great job. And she does the audio version of the novel. And so I'm very excited about it. Excited that it's out. It sounds great. She sounds great. It's been fun to revisit the stories again, and it's been a lot of years since I wrote that book, and so it lives on. And so if you are someone who loves audiobooks, check out Audible, Unlocking the Kingdom.
Hey, I'm Chris Whaley. I went from professional wrestling for 10 years, wrestling some of the biggest names in the business, 4 world champions, and I left the wrestling world to become a pastor. And I wrote a book about that transition because when I became a pastor, I found out that there were some people being abused and people being mistreated. And I ended up dealing with some people more as a professional wrestler than I did as a pastor. And I wrote a book about that transition called The Masked Saint. And it's available along with my other book, which is Harold's Heavenly Christmas. If you like Christmas stories, you're going to love this one, and one day it's going to be a movie. And then my last book is Mr. President. Has two lives, a comedian and the world heavyweight wrestling champion. And it is a great read.
Hi, welcome back. This is the Take It Home episode, which has nothing to do with takeout or DoorDash. And DoorDash is not a sponsor, by the way.
Yeah.
Chris, we were talking about high spots, and so you just touched on that real briefly.
Yeah.
Come back and explain to our audience and me.
Yeah.
What is a high spot? What does that look like?
If you're in the ring, you got a guy in a headlock, and he throws you into the rope and drop down. You go over. You hit the other ropes. You come back, and you kind of do a leapfrog over him. Hit the ropes, come back. It's just that high, fast moving spots and all. And in my early days, you just did a lot of wrestling holds. The headlocks and the arm locks and an arm drag and keeping an arm bar, and you're keeping the guy in those wrestling holds. And then when the heel of the bad guy did something that was unsportsmanlike, the crowd would just erupt because he did something that wasn't fair. Yeah. I guess that would be boring today because you don't see a lot of that. It's just a lot of big high spots in the ring.
Well, I think if we watch some of the nationally syndicated shows, WWE in particular, you got there used to be pay-per-views, now they're just streaming on Peacock, but there's a lot of glitz and glamour and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, though, that's a very elite few professional wrestlers. Mm-hmm. The bulk of wrestling doesn't look like that at all, does it? I mean, even to this day, right?
No.
What is it like if you're not on that WWE stage? What is it like for a wrestler trying to make, or not trying to make a living at it, just trying to crack into the business or trying to enjoy this part of their life? Right.
To be the Hulk Hogan or the John Cena or the Rock, that's not going to happen unless you know somebody in the business, or you're kin to somebody in the business, or you had a father who was in the business or whatever, and of course the promoter makes them the big cheese, right? But they got to have somebody to work against, and now they have big names to go with that. But you have a lot of guys like me, I got a good a friend, Bob Cook, who Bob worked with the biggest names in the business, but a lot of people wouldn't know who Bob Cook are unless you were in wrestling. Right. George South, who is a dedicated Christian guy. I mean, he is awesome. He's also an awesome wrestler, been in the business a long time. And do you know that name, George South?
No.
Well, he's pretty good because Ric Flair in his book mentioned, George South. Matter of fact, Ric Flair would come and he'd find out George South was on the card. He said, no, I'm not working with that guy. I'm working with George. The Road Warriors, same thing. No, we'll work against George and somebody. Everybody wanted to work with him. So you had some guys that were just great in the business, great at making other people look good, and but they were good in in their own rights, and you see it, a lot of autograph signings. My goodness, you have some guys that the average person wouldn't know, but if you're a diehard wrestling fan and you walk in there and you see some of those guys, hey, I remember you, sure. And so it's just a lot different today, especially, in my day you had territories. Right. Florida was huge territory, Georgia, the Carolinas, Pafo had his territory, Mid-South. In Texas there were 3 territories, and California, all over the place. And then, when Vince took it national and signed with USA, NBC, you can't compete with that. And of course, you had Ted Turner, who had the Super Channel and WCW. So that was basically it. And of course, Vince buys out WCW. So now he's the only show in town, except for all of the independent shows that are going on all over the country.
Sure.
But, my goodness, when you got national TV, you got pay-per-view, you can't, you can't do anything with that. But, a lot of guys are just enjoying life of working in independent shows. And, there's a lot of great independent organizations, but there's some pretty bad ones too. I mean, people that just, doing backyard wrestling and stuff like that, which is, I don't want to watch that. Yeah. But you do have some great independents today.
I would think, again, so tell me if I'm misreading this here. I think, isn't it true that some of these guys who have now achieved this star status in WWE came out of those independent programs, right? I mean,
I don't know that. I'm not really into. I can't tell you who's a star at WWE these days. Sure. I really can't tell you who's a star at AEW, except for a couple of them, But I don't know of any independent guys that have
made the jumped
up to that stardom.
So it's not like a baseball. It's not like a farm type of system at all, where these guys are doing time and getting experience here to make the jump one day.
Well, I think WWE has a farm system now. They've got right here in Orlando,
right?
Yeah, NXT. Yeah. So they get guys that are working on TV and getting better and make the next jump and all. But I don't know of anybody else that has that.
Do you think with WWE? And again, I know we're not affiliated with WWE, so I'm asking a question maybe neither one of us know. But is a significant part maybe of that NXT training incorporating that prep for working the mic and being on TV and really adapting the style? That's the whole character development, right?
Yeah, okay. Everything. Yeah.
Now, this loaded question here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about kind of behind the scenes of wrestling. Mm-hmm. Anybody going to be coming after you, body slamming you for this?
I'm an old man. I don't think so. But I've heard. My goodness, I've heard Hulk Hogan on a couple of big podcasts. I heard him on Theo Von and I've heard him on other things, and he's saying stuff. And of course, if you read the newspapers, you read about Vince McMahon's, episode there and with Hulk Hogan. So all that stuff has pretty well come out. Of course, all the stuff on steroids and stuff like that. If somebody wants to come after me, they can. Okay. They can. That's all right.
Well, at the end of the day, if you think about it, where we've been though, right? The end is predetermined. We're going to talk about that again after this next break. But also, what it takes to get there is very real.
Oh yeah.
And so it can be serious business and dangerous business.
Mm-hmm. Got hurt quite a bit
with the nicks that you've taken. We're going to come back. We're going to take another break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what it means to have a predetermined finish. As we take this this episode, and an issue. Maybe we got issues. We'll take it home. We'll be right back.
Hey, I want you to know the Jeff Dixon I know. Jeff, I want to know something about you. Who's the most famous person you ever met?
Well, besides yourself, Chris, I meet a lot of famous people. I spend most of my time around famous people. But there was a film came out, a little Christian film came out a few years ago, Passion of the Christ, The Passion. Mm-hmm. You may have heard of it. The film produced by, written by, directed by Mel Gibson. I got the opportunity to go to a premiere of that film. It was the non-subtitled version, and it was a surprise showing, and they had hyped it up, and all of a sudden, all the security started showing up, and there were police that started showing up at all these doors. It was a pastor's conference, and it dawned on me, something big's going on here. They're going to show us a film. I bet it's The Passion. And so I got up, I snuck out, and I went out to the choir loft, and in the back hallway, Mel Gibson was standing there eating popcorn, waiting to be introduced. And the policeman came over and goes, "What do you do back here?" I said, "I'm here with this friend of mine, is Mel. And hey, Mel. And he goes, hey, how you doing, man? And on the way he walked in. So that's the most famous person I met, and you know, and the rest is history.
Jeff, we got some dead air time. What are you doing?
Chris, I'm looking at the Church at 434 app. It's an incredible app. It's absolutely free. And you can watch us, you can watch video, you can get resources for your walk and your journey of faith, and it's absolutely free. Just go to the Church at 434 and your app store, Google Play, and just download it and join us online all the time. Hi, welcome back. We are in the middle of a Take It Home episode where we're looking at kind of behind the scenes wrestling, stuff that maybe you did or didn't know, and stuff that maybe you always wondered about. Chris has been very generous about kind of giving us a behind the scenes peek at what's going on. You know, you've been in the business, you've retired from the business, you know wrestlers, we know wrestlers to this day. I mean, you know, we're still connected to the wrestling industry. You're very connected to it. What advice do you give to somebody out there who's watching, saying, you know what, that sounds like fun, hard work, but fun? How do they get into the business to find out even if they like it? Well,
With everything I know now, if I was getting in, and when young people come to me, number one, you know, how do you look in the ring? I've seen some shows with, you know, guys that weighed 180 pounds and, you know, didn't have a good build. I just don't see how you can make it with that. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, God has given you a great chance to do something else, and you can still make an impact for Him doing something else. But, you know, you got to look good in the ring. I would make sure that I had the very best person in the business that I could get to train me, to make sure that I was fit to get in that ring for the very first time. I mean, and, you know, there's some great people. I mentioned George South. George South has a school. There's, you know, a couple of good schools here in Florida. We had Alex Porto on, and he's one of the best at training. So I'd make sure that I had the best guy training me. You got to look good in the ring, and you have to be realistic. You know, am I going to be on WWE? Possibilities are not good. Now, you know, I'll tell you this. I know this story. When Vince was at the height of his success, somebody went to him and said there was a guy in one of the organizations that was really saying bad things about you, and it was Randy Macho Man Savage, you know. And so he put a match on so that Vince could see of the Macho Man working, and then the comments that he made. But he was so impressed with him in the ring. He said, I don't care what he said, get him. I want him here. And of course, the story is that, you know, Randy Savage went to WWE and was one of the biggest stars. So are you going to make it in one of the big companies? You know, there is that possibility. I mean, you could do so well in the independent circuit that, you know, that news gets to them. You look good, you got a good gimmick or whatever, they're going to, you know, might give you a shot. Another thing is having a gimmick. You know, when I first started wrestling, I wrestled under my own name. I wrestled as Chris Michaels. I wrestled as Chris Hawkins, Chris Whaley. And then, you know, I donned the mask because I was at a church and they didn't want me wrestling. So I had to, and I was really blessed. I came up with the gimmick of working as a saint. I figured, how great is that? We're all saints if we're believers, you know. And so I had, the white mask, white trunks, and white tights, white boots, That was a great gimmick for me, But, you look at all those great gimmicks in the WWE, Vince McMahon, he's the guy that, made Hulk Hogan and
Sure.
The Undertaker. I worked against The Undertaker in 1988, and I think he was working under the name of Powerhouse. Yeah. And I think he worked as Mean Mark, and I know he worked for WCW. But Vince McMahon is the one that made him into The Undertaker,
Sure.
A good gimmick like that is priceless, So those are some things that might help somebody trying to get into the business.
Well, when you put the mask on, it doesn't get spiritual on us here. So let's talk about that for a minute, because obviously, all of life is a biblical illustration.
Right.
We know that. God uses everything that we do. What kind of spiritual lessons did you learn in the industry, in the wrestling ring, that really have equated to life?
And I learned about disappointment. I was never a huge star in wrestling, and a lot of people, when you say the Masked Saint, they go, who? So that didn't break my heart. I learned about disappointment.
But they don't have movies made about them. I just want that on the record, just so you guys know. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. But I just want to make sure we clarify that.
You learn about disappointment. You learn about working with people. I mean, you really got to work with somebody to make that match come off, to make it something that people really want to watch and they want to see you again. So, in the Christian life, you got to work with people. Some of those people may not be some of the nicest people in the world to work with, but you still got to do that. And also character. You got to. The people, they knew I was a professional wrestler, but they also knew I was a minister. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a home run if a guy was talking and he dropped a few expletives, and he'd look and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, preacher, I forgot." That was like a home run. That my character was actually something that somebody noticed.
Yeah.
So you got to be a person of character in your Christian walk, and also if you're a believer, it's already been predetermined. Who you're gonna be with, and the hope that we have after this life is over.
Now, I think that's one of the huge takeaways that you and I talked about many times before. Mm-hmm. That was always kind of impressed me about wrestling. Wrestling is great entertainment. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is. It's a lot of fun, and I love the fact that we're getting to meet wrestlers as we do this show and get to talk to them. I love to see I love the local shows. I think they're fantastic, and just great entertainment to watch. But that what you just said is so true, right? Because as followers, as Christians, once we accept Christ, we know how our story ends. Mm-hmm. We know where we end up. We know what's going on. We know what's going to happen to us,
right?
And we spend eternity in heaven. But yet, in wrestling, even though the end is predetermined, you've laid out for us. The number of nicks and concussions and aches and pains and stuff. There's some disconnect sometimes in followers where they don't understand that even though the end is predetermined, it's going to be a fight to get there.
Right.
And that's normal, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
As a pastor, you saw that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a battle.
It is. And there's nothing wrong with the battle.
No.
The battle makes us better.
Yeah.
And so Chris, man, I appreciate you peeling back just a little bit. There's a lot more we could talk about, but of course, we can only stay on here so long because Abundant TV would kick us off. If we went too long, we don't want to do that. But in the meantime, we invite people to check out our websites. You guys have seen the commercials. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Yep. Don't tap out.